Some warships are just steel and guns, but others forge a legend written in fire and shadow. This is the story of one such ship, the Japanese heavy cruiser Chōkai, arguably the most formidable of its type in World War II. Her name would become synonymous with a shocking victory, a ghost that haunted the waters of the Solomon Islands. Yet her story is not just one of triumph, but also of a brutal, grinding war that would lead to a warrior's end in the largest naval battle in history. This is the rise and fall of the Chōkai. Part 1. Forged for Supremacy, the Tsavo class. In the aftermath of the First World War, the great naval powers sought to prevent another costly arms race. The result was the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922, a document that placed strict limits on the size and armament of warships. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, or IJN, these limitations were not just a constraint, they were a challenge. Unable to compete with the United States and Great Britain in sheer numbers, Japan's naval doctrine pivoted towards quality over quantity. Their strategy was to build warships that were, ton for ton, superior to any potential adversary. The Tsavo-class heavy cruisers were the ultimate expression of this philosophy. Laid down in March 1928 at the Mitsubishi Nagasaki shipyards, Chōkai was the fourth and final ship of her class. When she was commissioned into the fleet on June 30, 1932, she was a marvel of naval engineering. Displacing over 13,000 tons, she was a sleek, powerful predator. Her main armament consisted of 10 203mm or 8-inch guns housed in 5 twin turrets. This gave her a heavier broadside than most cruisers of the era. These guns could hurl a 125-kilogram, 276-pound shell over 29 kilometers, 18 miles, making them a threat to any ship short of a battleship. But her guns were only part of the story. Like her sisters, Chōkai was equipped with what was perhaps Japan's gravest secret weapon, the Type 93 torpedo. Nicknamed the Long Lance by the Allies after the war, these were enormous 610mm, 24-inch, oxygen-propelled torpedoes. They were faster, had a much longer range, and carried a far more powerful warhead than any torpedo in the Allied arsenal. Chōkai carried 16 of these deadly fish in rotating mounts, giving her a knockout punch that many Allied commanders would tragically underestimate. Visually, the Tsavo class was dominated by a massive pagoda-like bridge structure. This 7-story tower contained the bridge, fire control centers, communications, and command facilities. While it gave the ships an imposing silhouette, it also made them top-heavy and presented a huge target, a design flaw that would have consequences later in the war. The ship was fast, too. Her powerful turbines could propel her through the water at speeds of up to 35 knots, or around 65 kilometers per hour, allowing her to outrun most enemy warships. In every sense, Chōkai was built to be a fleet's alpha predator, designed for decisive yet close-range night battles where her superior optics and devastating torpedoes would give her the edge. Part 2. The Southern Onslaught. When war finally erupted in the Pacific in December 1941, Chōkai was more than ready. Assigned to Vice Admiral Nobutake Kondo's Southern Force, she was at the tip of the spear for Japan's ambitious southern expansion. Her first major assignment was supporting the Japanese invasion of Malaya. Sailing from French Indochina, she provided distant cover for the invasion convoys, her presence a powerful deterrent against any potential interference by the British Royal Navy. Following the stunning success of the Malayan campaign and the fall of Singapore, Chōkai's mission continued. She moved to support the invasion of the oil-rich Dutch East Indies. Here she operated as a flagship, leading a powerful cruiser squadron that swept through the region. Her duties were varied: hunting for enemy shipping, protecting troop transports, and asserting Japanese naval dominance. During these early months of the war, Chōkai and her crew honed their skills. They participated in the pursuit and sinking of several fleeing Allied vessels, including American destroyers and a British minesweeper. These early operations were a resounding success. They were executed with precision and ruthlessness, showcasing the IJN's high state of training and the effectiveness of ships like Chōkai. For her crew, it was a period of unbroken victory. They had swept aside every opponent and helped secure a vast new empire for Japan. But these were merely the opening acts. Chōkai's greatest test and her moment of lasting fame was yet to come. It would take place in the dark, contested waters around an obscure island that would soon become the epicenter of the Pacific War. Guadalcanal. Part 3. The Ghost of Savo Island. A perfect victory. By August 1942, the tide of the Pacific War was beginning to turn. The American victory at Midway in June had checked Japan's eastward expansion. Now, the United States was taking its first major offensive step. On August 7th, U.S. Marines landed on the islands of Guadalcanal and Tulagi in the Solomon Islands, catching the Japanese by surprise. Their objective was to seize a nearly complete airfield on Guadalcanal, which in Japanese hands would threaten the vital supply lines between the U.S. and Australia. The Japanese naval command in Rabaul was stunned. Vice Admiral Gunichi Mikawa, commander of the newly formed 8th Fleet, knew he had to act immediately. He hastily assembled a strike force of the ships available to him. It was a powerful squadron, consisting of 5 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and a single destroyer. As his flagship, the vessel that would lead this daring counterattack, he chose the Chōkai. Mikawa's plan was audacious. He would sail his force down the slot, the channel running through the Solomon Islands, under the cover of darkness. His goal was to slip past Allied picket ships, enter the Sound north of Guadalcanal, and annihilate the Allied naval forces protecting the vulnerable transport ships. It was a high-risk gamble. He would be operating within range of American carrier aircraft and the land-based planes from the captured airfield. The key to success was speed, stealth, and surprise. On the night of August 8th, Mikawa's force began its high-speed run. American reconnaissance aircraft spotted the Japanese ships, but a series of communication blunders and faulty analyses meant the warning never reached the Allied fleet commanders. As night fell, the Allied naval force, under the command of British Rear Admiral Victor Crutchfield, was split into 2 groups to screen the western approaches to the transport area. The southern force consisted of the heavy cruisers HMAS Canberra and USS Chicago, while the northern force had the heavy cruisers USS Vincennes, USS Astoria, and USS Quincy. The commanders were confident, but their crews were exhausted after 2 days of constant alerts. A state of relaxed readiness had set in. To put it mildly, the Allied fleet was sleeping. Just after 1 in the morning on August 9th, Chōkai led the Japanese column into the channel, which would soon be grimly renamed Iron Bottom Sound. The night was pitch black and moonless. Using their superior night optics, the lookouts on Chōkai spotted the Southern Allied group first. Mikawa gave the order, "All ships, attack!" The battle began with a salvo of long lance torpedoes streaking silently towards the Allied ships. A moment later, Chōkai's float plane dropped flares, perfectly silhouetting the unsuspecting Allied cruisers. Then, Chōkai's 10 massive guns erupted in the dark. The first salvos were devastatingly accurate. The Australian cruiser Canberra was hit by over 24 shells in the first 2 minutes, crippling her, knocking out her power and starting massive fires. The USS Chicago had her bow blown off by a torpedo, but managed to escape into the darkness. Mikawa's column, with Chōkai at its head, then turned north, directly towards the second Allied group. The 3 American cruisers were in chaos. They had been woken from their sleep by the sound of gunfire, but had no idea where the enemy was. As they struggled to man their guns, the full fury of the Japanese squadron fell upon them. Chōkai and the other cruisers systematically tore them apart with a relentless barrage of shellfire and torpedoes. The USS Astoria was set ablaze from stem to stern. The USS Quincy, caught in a crossfire between 2 Japanese columns, was riddled with hits and sank within minutes. The flagship of the northern force, the USS Vincennes, was hit by at least 70 shells and multiple torpedoes, rolling over and sinking shortly after. The entire engagement, from the first shot to the last, had taken just over 30 minutes. It was a stunning, almost unbelievable victory for the Japanese. Mikawa had sunk 4 Allied heavy cruisers and badly damaged another, all without losing a single ship of his own. Chōkai had led the charge, firing over 300 rounds from her main guns and proving herself to be the perfect instrument for the IJN's doctrine of night warfare. The Battle of Savo Island was the worst defeat at sea in the history of the United States Navy. For the sailors who survived, the memory of those ghostly shapes in the dark, led by the Chōkai, would be a permanent nightmare. Part 4. The Guadalcanal Meat Grinder. The victory at Savo Island cemented Chōkai's legendary status, but it did not win the campaign. Admiral Mikawa, despite his tactical brilliance, made the controversial decision to withdraw without attacking the vulnerable American transport ships. This allowed the U.S. Marines on Guadalcanal to be resupplied, setting the stage for a brutal 6-month-long war of attrition. For Chōkai and the rest of the IJN, the fighting was far from over. The waters around the Solomon Islands became a battlefield. Chōkai was a frequent participant in the so-called Tokyo Express, the nightly runs by Japanese destroyers and cruisers to deliver troops and supplies to their beleaguered forces on Guadalcanal. Her speed and heavy armament made her an ideal escort for these high-risk missions, fending off attacks from American PT boats and destroyers that prowled the darkness. In mid-October 1942, Chōkai participated in another key mission, the bombardment of Henderson Field. Along with her sister ship Kinugasa, she steamed into Iron Bottom Sound and unleashed a furious barrage on the American-held airfield. Over the course of the night, the two cruisers fired more than 700 203mm shells onto the American positions, cratering the runways and destroying aircraft on the ground. It was a demonstration of raw naval power, designed to cripple American air superiority and pave the way for a major Japanese ground offensive. However, the Americans were resilient. The Seabees would repair the runways with incredible speed, and more aircraft would be flown in. The Guadalcanal campaign devolved into a meat grinder for both sides. Naval battles erupted almost weekly in the waters of the slot. While Chōkai avoided the fate of many other Japanese warships that were sunk during this period, the constant operations took a toll on her crew and machinery. The stunning, one-sided victory of Savo Island was now a distant memory, replaced by the grim reality of a sustained, attritional conflict that Japan could not afford. By early 1943, the Japanese evacuated their remaining troops from Guadalcanal, conceding defeat. Chōkai had survived, but the war had changed. The IJN was now firmly on the defensive. Part 5. The Final Charge, Battle off Samar. For the next year and a half, Chōkai served in a variety of roles. She performed escort duties for convoys, patrolled Japanese-held territory, and underwent refits that added more anti-aircraft guns to her decks, a tacit admission that the greatest threat now came from the sky. By October 1944, the war had reached its final, desperate phase for Japan. American forces, under the command of General Douglas MacArthur, were about to land at Leyte in the Philippines, threatening to cut Japan off from its vital oil supplies in the south. The Japanese High Command devised a complex and desperate plan to stop them, codenamed Shogo 1. It involved sending virtually the entire remaining strength of the Imperial Japanese Navy to attack the American invasion fleet from 3 different directions. Chōkai was assigned to the most powerful of these fleets, the Center Force, under the command of Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita. This force comprised 5 battleships, including the super battleships Yamato and Musashi, 10 heavy cruisers, and a screen of destroyers. Their mission was to transit the San Bernardino Strait and fall upon the American landing beaches at dawn. The plan began to unravel almost immediately. American submarines and carrier aircraft relentlessly attacked the center force as it crossed the Sibuyan Sea. The super battleship Musashi was sunk, and another heavy cruiser was forced to turn back. Shaken, Admiral Kurita temporarily reversed course, but later that night, he pushed onward, entering the San Bernardino Strait unopposed. On the morning of October 25th, as Kurita's force exited the strait into the Philippine Sea, his lookouts spotted something unexpected. It was not the powerful battleships and carriers of the U.S. Third Fleet, which had been lured away to the north. Instead, it was Taffy 3, a tiny task unit of 6 slow escort carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 even smaller destroyer escorts. These were some of the lightest and most vulnerable ships in the U.S. Navy, tasked only with supporting the troops on the ground. To the Japanese, it was a dream come true. To the Americans, it was a death sentence. Kurita gave the order for a general attack. The Japanese ships surged forward, their massive guns opening fire on the fleeing American carriers. Chōkai, as one of the lead cruisers, charged into the fray. The battle that followed was one of the most lopsided and heroic naval actions in history. The American ships of Taffy III, hopelessly outgunned, turned to fight. Their destroyers charged headlong into the Japanese fleet, firing torpedoes and blazing away with their small 5-inch guns. Their aircraft, armed with whatever they had, made relentless attacks, strafing and bombing the Japanese warships. Chōkai was in the thick of it. She engaged the American escort carrier USS White Plains, scoring hits with her 8-inch guns. She dodged torpedoes launched by the heroic destroyer USS Johnston. For a time, it seemed that the sheer power of the Japanese force would be unstoppable, but the ferocity of the American defense was beginning to tell. Part 6: A Warrior's End. The sky above the Battle of Samar was a hornet's nest of American aircraft. Pilots from the escort carriers flew sortie after sortie, attacking with a suicidal bravery. It was a plane from the escort carrier USS Kitkenbay, a Grumman TBM Avenger, that would seal Chōkai's fate. Around 8 in the morning, the Avenger swooped in and planted a 500-pound bomb on Chōkai's starboard side, amidships. The damage was catastrophic. The bomb hit near the engine rooms and, more critically, detonated some of Chōkai's own Type 93 torpedoes that were stowed in their mouths. The resulting explosion was immense. It crippled her engines, severed steering control, and started uncontrollable fires that raged through the ship. Dead in the water and shrouded in smoke, the mighty Chōkai fell out of the battle line. The hunter had become the hunted. As the battle raged on elsewhere, Chōkai was left helpless. With her fires burning out of control and unable to move, her situation was hopeless. Later that day, the Japanese destroyer Fujinami was dispatched to assist. After taking off her surviving crew, including her captain, the Fujinami fired a single torpedo into the crippled cruiser. The long lance, the same weapon that Chōkai had used to such devastating effect at Savo Island, now delivered the final blow to the ship herself. The proud cruiser rolled over and slipped beneath the waves. Her long and storied career finally over. But the tragedy was not yet complete. The Fujinami, now carrying the survivors of the Chōkai, attempted to withdraw from the battle area. The next day, on October 26, the destroyer was caught by American carrier aircraft from the USS Essex. In a swift and brutal attack, Fujinami was bombed and sunk. There were no survivors. Every last man from the Chōkai, who had been rescued just hours before, went down with the ship that had tried to save them. It was a grim and final postscript to the cruiser's violent life. Conclusion: a fearsome legacy. The story of the Chōkai is a story of the Imperial Japanese Navy in microcosm. It is a story of brilliant design, tactical supremacy, and shocking initial victories, followed by a long and brutal decline into a desperate, unwinnable war. At the Battle of Savo Island, Chōkai proved herself to be one of the most effective fighting ships of her time. A perfect predator in the darkness, she was the ghost that haunted Iron Bottom Sound, a symbol of the IJN's mastery of night combat. Yet, she ended her life in a chaotic daylight brawl, crippled not by a rival cruiser or a mighty battleship, but by a single bomb from a small aircraft flown from a converted merchant hull. Her demise at the hands of Taffy III, and the subsequent loss of all her survivors, was a tragic and poignant end for a ship that had once seemed invincible. In 2019, the wreck of the Chōkai was discovered lying in the depths of the Philippine Sea, over 5,000 meters, 16,700 feet down. She rests there today, a silent monument to the ferocity of the Pacific War. Her legacy is that of a magnificent and deadly warship, a warrior that achieved one of the greatest victories in naval history, only to be consumed by the very conflict she was built to dominate. The ocean keeps many secrets, and the story of the Chōkai is just one of the countless legends resting in the deep. What other phantom ships or forgotten heroes of naval warfare are you curious about? Drop your mission briefings in the comments below and let us know which piece of military history we should investigate next. And if you enjoy uncovering these incredible stories from the past, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. That way, you won't miss a single deep dive as we continue to bring history's most compelling tales to the surface.